All right, everybody. Hello, my name is Laszlo Jentes, and I'm going to be giving a presentation on my experience with the McMaster School's Gap Year program this year. So if you'll give me just a moment to pull up the presentation, we'll get started. All right, is everybody able to see that okay? Awesome. All right, so as I said, my name's Laszlo. I'm from Chicago. I have never actually been to Defiance, but I decided to take a gap year this year, and I was lucky enough to discover the gap year programs offered through the McMaster School. One of them was, I believe, titled COVID-19 Food Security, and the other one was an emphasis on protecting those in poverty during COVID-19. So I kind of rolled those two together and had two 8-week courses that I took with the help of Dean Studer and Director Mathews here. And honestly, I had a fantastic experience. So I'll jump right in. So for those of you who may not know, community-based research, which is sort of the emphasis of the courses that I took, is a collaborative enterprise between academic researchers and community members. It's important because it validates multiple sources of knowledge and promotes the use of multiple methods of discovery and dissemination of the knowledge that's produced through the research. Basically, in short, it is a collaboration between academic between academic people and the community members that they're trying to work with and benefit. So to begin this process, I reached out to a number of community organizations here in Chicago. Not in my own neighborhood. There's a neighborhood directly west of me called Humboldt Park that generally has a lot more need, a lot more people living in poverty or who are not food secure. So I reached out to a local church with a food pantry, as well as another faith-affiliated organization called the Chicago Dream Center. But I eventually settled on an organization called La Casa Norte. I had a connection with them through my mother, actually, who knew somebody, you know, the whole deal. And basically, as soon as I had my first meeting with them, I knew that they were going to be the right people for the project. Their mission was wonderful. They were super enthusiastic about getting me involved. And that was the beginning of the project. So their mission is to serve youth and families confronting homelessness. They provide access to stable housing, deliver comprehensive services that act as a catalyst to just transform lives and communities. So that's directly from their website. I actually was primarily focused on their food pantry that they run, which they do in conjunction with the an organization called Lakeview Pantry here in Chicago, which is sort of their partner, I suppose. They're a subsidiary. They get all the food from Lakeview Pantry, but they run their own independent programs. And they're primarily a housing first organization. So they do a lot of work with transitional housing, permanent housing for youth and families. So without further ado, the actual project. But first, sort of why would I bother doing community-based research when I could sort of do a more, I guess, well-known method or traditional. And basically, the idea was that because CBR validates on-the-ground experience, it was ideal for going into an area and learning about exactly what the challenges were in that local context, as opposed to sort of going with what I got off an internet website or out of a book or something like that, or what I saw in the news. I could go and actually engage with clients, people from the neighborhood, and really understand what they were trying to deal with and accomplish much greater good than if I had sort of taken it in the abstract. So to accomplish this, I met directly with a lot of staff at La Casa Norte to determine their specific needs, and I built my project from that information as opposed to coming in with a predetermined goal. So some context on the area. The general demographics here, so it's roughly 50,000 people in the neighborhood as of 2018. I think it's grown actually pretty significantly since then. That said, relatively high poverty rate, relatively low educational attainment, and probably one of the most important factors for my project was that there's a majority Hispanic population, particularly in West Humboldt Park, where La Casa Norte is located. So luckily for me, I have a background in the language, and so I didn't necessarily need a translator or interpreter most of the time when I was engaging with clients. But it was certainly a factor when I got into the project itself. So some of the challenges were that before the pandemic even, Humboldt Park was designated as a food desert, so there's not many grocery stores or places to get healthy food. We served a good number of clients that were living with disabilities, who were otherwise unable to reach services, or they had dietary restrictions, et cetera. And obviously a large number of the population was living under the federal poverty line. And then obviously COVID hits, we all saw the headlines, we know the stories, record unemployment, layoffs, et cetera. A lot more people were facing food insecurity than ever before, maybe not ever before, but certainly a lot of people suddenly had lost their jobs, didn't know what kind of resources were available to them. And so they might have been ashamed of having to use these resources or these organizations that they had sort of not known about, or had sort of maybe never thought that they would be the ones to turn to them for help. And actually, on a sort of more regulation level, increased unemployment aid that was rolled out by a lot of places can actually remove eligibility for food stamps, et cetera, because of the greater income that's provided. So to try and counteract this, the state of Illinois actually massively expanded the food stamps program. So it removed a lot of screening, increased the allotment, and actually provided additional resources to families that had members who were on food stamps. So challenges for LCN specifically is that they had reduced or no capacity indoors due to pandemic precautions. They weren't always able to ensure that clients knew about the services or how the procedures had changed. So outreach was definitely an issue for them. And lastly, they had to figure out how to adapt their current services to safe recommendations. So for instance, they used to serve clients inside in a supermarket style, where there would be a volunteer shopper who would go through with a client. The client could choose specific items that they needed. They could take, I don't know, 2 cans of beans and eggs. If that's really all that they needed, they could just take that and go. But because of COVID, they had to start pre-packing large boxes of staples. And so it actually got to the point where clients require either a car or a cart in order to take the food back. And so that was something that both the organization and the clients had to adapt to. So with all of this context in mind, all of this that I learned either from things that I could find academically in terms of demographics, but also through my conversations with a lot of the staff at the organization, they decided that the most useful thing for them would be that if I conducted a revamp of existing marketing materials to assist with that outreach and information segment, after being informed by the second part of the project, which was an informal interview of clients, basically while they were being served, in order to document their stories and their experience. And that could be used in the future at the organization's discretion with client consent, either for marketing or for grant writing. But more importantly, it would give valuable information on how outreach was going, what other services might be needed during the time, and overall just things that La Casa wasn't able to research themselves because they didn't have the manpower at the time. So to realize this, I attended each aspect of their nutrition center, which is what they refer to as sort of the umbrella of the food pantry, their soup kitchen. They actually had pop-up pantries running in the fall, so that I could really understand what all they were trying to accomplish, what all the different programs were when they ran, who would come to them, et cetera. And I also got in touch with the executive director, community outreach director, and the volunteer coordinator, as well as, of course, the clients, to obtain sort of their existing materials and understand the challenges and the needs of the organization. So ultimately, my goal was to create a tangible product in the form of an archive of transcribed and translated client interviews when necessary. I think it ended up being about 50% English, 50% Spanish, in addition to the raw audio recordings for the organization to use in marketing materials or grant writing with client consent. and the other goal was to gather feedback through those interviews on their experience, what outreach methods were working, and what other services might be needed. So ultimately, both of these goals were met, which was fantastic. So I delivered an organized archive of those interviews, as well as a research report that was analyzing client responses and providing recommendations for outreach improvements, and just ways that they could generally alter their process if they, obviously entirely at the organization's discretion, but sort of based on the data, what could they do to improve, especially given the extraordinary circumstances. So these were the interview questions that I asked. Very straightforward, very simple. Obviously, these were not hour-long interviews or anything like that. A lot of these clients had better things to do, and I didn't want to get in their way, so I would basically conduct these in the line while they waited for service. And so they had to be straightforward, but still provide enough information to be valuable to the organization. So here's the data from the responses. I think we had a total of around 30 interviews, which, given that each day we served between 60 to 80 clients at the time, was a pretty decent sample of the population. So I'll give you a moment to look over the data. And then the second part. So you can see from all of this that overall, La Casa Norte has a fantastic reputation with its clients in general. It's been a very valuable resource for many people during the pandemic. And as such, it sort of confirms what we already knew. And sort of my reflections on the program, my personal skills that I gained were working professionally in a research capacity. This is something that I really didn't expect to see myself doing the year after my senior year. I know undergrad research is already rare enough, despite many schools' attempts to sort of expand it. But I really never expected to be doing an official research project of any kind as soon as I did. So having that exposure was really a fantastic experience. And then because of the translation work that I had to do and the interactions that I had with either Spanish speaking only or bilingual clients, I was managed to enhance my Spanish skills quite considerably. I also learned a qualitative research analysis method, which I'd be happy to provide to anybody in the Q&A after this presentation. And I also just generally built up some of my interpersonal communication skills. I hadn't had to schedule all these interviews, the meetings, et cetera, before in such a sort of robust way. So it was really a good opportunity to work on that relationship building. So some outcomes from this that I can deliver is that La Casa Norte actually adopted a new method of displaying the information packets. So I'm not sure if you noticed, but the number of people who used it or weren't sort of sure what the information packets could do for them was actually pretty high. So they added QR codes to the front of the carts that we deliver the food in. And while volunteers are actually loading the client's food into their cars, another volunteer or one of the other people on staff will sort of come out, have them scan the QR code and open the web page with all the resources for them in front of them so that they can really understand what all they have access to. It's not a piece of paper that gets lost in the trash or something like that. That they can really understand that if they need rental assistance or healthcare or legal assistance, et cetera, that they can have access to this web page that has information on all of that. And on a more personal note, I'm hoping that my final paper and report will be published in a community-based research journal 2 years from now. So thank you very much to Dean Studer and Director Mathews for that. I, again, was not expecting to have that kind of opportunity to be a published author this early in my academic career. So with that, I figure I will open it up for a Q&A. If anybody has any questions about the program, I'd like to say thanks in advance to Dean Studer and Director Mathews for giving me this opportunity to present on my experience. You guys did an amazing job, tons of support throughout the year. And I hope that you guys will continue to do these gap year courses, because it was truly a wonderful opportunity that kind of just came out of the blue. So thank you guys so much. If anybody has a question, feel free to just unmute and I'll answer it as best I can.
I do have a question about your qualitative analysis data. I saw that you use like the radar method. Like, what exactly is that, and like how do you use that with your data?
Yeah, so it's a method for basically going through and coding specifically things like interviews, where you have a lot of material to work with. It's probably better in a kind of like, maybe if I had like 30 minutes of material to sort of sort through, but I could basically go through and pick out themes, etc., and highlight those and cut down what I had so that I could really parse out the answers to the questions that I was looking for and like come up with something meaningful, rather than having like, this person said this person said this, these are kind of grouped under this. I was very much able to kind of cut it down and have it in an organized format for me to process and really get some quality data out of it. If you'd like, I actually have the link to the article that discusses it, and I can send that to you if you would like that. Or I can share it in the chat.
Yeah, I would love that.
Give me just a moment, and I will do that. All right.
Before we close, I would love to hear from you. What surprised you the most about yourself in doing this process, and what's the biggest thing you learned?
I think for me, I think the biggest thing that surprised me is probably like my own competence in it. Like I really was like, I mean, you guys were an awesome support, but obviously it wasn't like I was there in defiance with you to kind of hold my hand the whole time. And so the kind of independence that it fostered in me, I think was really pretty incredible. And I really appreciate it for that opportunity. And did you say the other one was the biggest thing I learned? Yeah. What is it? That's a really good question. I think honestly, it's not super related to the course, but it might be that there's a lot of really incredible people volunteering. Like I gained a lot of appreciation for volunteers in all of the work that they do. Like basically, there's only 2 people who kind of assist staff-wise with the food pantries, etc. And so going there over the course of 16 weeks, the variety of people that I met and their dedication to helping people out wherever they can was really impressive. So I thought that kind of it struck me in a way that I don't think I had experienced before, kind of people's dedication to helping others. So
I have a quick question. Oh, hang on.
Do that. Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh. Dylan and I are starting on.
Why is it still doing that?
Here, why don't you try unmuting Kelsey? If Dylan's still on mute, it might work.
Okay.
Or if he turns down his speakers. There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
You're all good.
Sorry. Dylan and I are sitting right next to each other, so it was feeding off of each other.
No worries.
But I don't remember if you said this at the beginning or not, but do you have like, I know you took this as a gap year course, but do you have like any idea like what you want to do like next year, like with your future, things like that?
Yeah. I'm hoping to attend McMaster College in the fall. Ideally, I'd be studying political science and international studies, but at the same time, this has kind of opened my eyes to like, I could do something in sociology or in the nonprofit sector, or like, these are connections that I've kind of made that I definitely want to hold on to. Yeah. So I think I don't really have a great idea of it right now. And it could totally change going forward, but I think that's what I would like to do, is kind of like a diplomacy focus, but I definitely see myself being involved in this kind of work in the future. So
yeah, absolutely. And something else that's really cool. So like, I'm a McMaster scholar, so I'm sure Marianne has kind of told you about that. It's crazy how you can do this undergrad research and things like that and still form it to your area of study. So I'm an education major, so I was able to work in Belize with the schools in Belize and do all this community-based research. So kind of with your project now, I know you said political science and things like that. So like, say you still wanted to be involved with this project you've done during your gap year, I'm sure there's some way, some how that you could kind of put that political science twist on all this research you've done and do some type of comparative analysis or something. So I just think that's really cool. It like to see how you can like put that twist to make it meet what you want to do with your future, all while still benefiting the communities you're working in.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's the ideal scenario. Like I would love to be able to do that and continue kind of making that change and doing this work, because it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, Kelsey actually took my question, Laszlo. Where did you say you're going on to grad school, and how might you use this for a possible career opportunity?
I'm actually will just be going to undergrad next year, but I will be hopefully attending McMaster College in the Twin Cities, small liberal arts place, only about 2,000 students. And ideally, at the moment, I'm thinking that I would want to do something with diplomacy or some kind of I want to have like a political science, but also international organization. So I might end up working with an NGO of some sort, or an international nonprofit, but I really want to have like a global perspective wherever I end up.
So there's some notable differences. I want Dylan and Kelsey, and Dr. Burke has been involved in a lot of McMaster initiatives. So it was really interesting to me that Laszlo was able to do this he was able to make the partnerships himself, which Dylan kind of relates to your project specifically. And then the other thing is he was able to do this in one semester where you guys have an entire year. So where the model of community-based research kind of was translated through Laszlo and his work. It's very interesting, a lot of very similar outcomes.
I definitely think that I got lucky in a lot of ways, in that I already kind of had an in at La Casa Norte. Like my mother knew someone who was my mother knew someone who knew someone who was a director, and they were sort of able to put me in touch. So without that, I don't know that it would have ran as smoothly, but still, like, you never know. I think it's definitely possible to do a sort of a more condensed or a more accelerated thing. And I think that this kind of proves that, which is great.
Well, what a great session. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. Laszlo, you did a great job presenting, and we are so glad that we were able to host you at the symposium. If anyone has any questions for Laszlo or any follow-up things, you can contact me or Marianne, and maybe we can get you in touch. So thanks again, everyone, for coming. And Laszlo, you take care.
Hey, it's great to see you again, Laszlo. We appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for inviting me. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Yeah, keep us posted, will you?
Will do.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.